You open Spotify, you hit play, and for a second, it feels like the toll booth on all of music. Everyone passes through it. Hundreds of millions of people, every single day. But here's the strange part. Spotify doesn't own a single song you just played. Not one. Not the track, not the album, not the artist. It's renting all of it. So when you pay for Spotify every month, where does that money actually go? Because almost none of it stays at Spotify. This is a company everybody uses, and almost nobody gets rich from. The large majority of your subscription, commonly cited at around 70%, flows straight back out the door, to the people who own the music. What's left makes Spotify one of the thinnest margin platforms in all of technology. It looks like the toll booth on music, but someone else owns the road. And figuring out who owns it is the whole story of where pricing power comes from. Spotify is everywhere. It's the default place a whole generation goes to hear anything. Put it on Spotify is just how people say, play a song now. And the scale is enormous, something on the order of 500 million listeners passing through the same app. When one company sits between almost everyone and the thing they want, your instinct says it must be powerful. It must set the price. The platform in the middle holds the leverage. So you'd expect Spotify to be a money machine. But it isn't. For most of its life, Spotify has been barely profitable, sometimes not profitable at all. It struggles to raise prices. And that's the first crack in the toll booth story. If Spotify really controlled this road, the money would pile up at the booth. So let's follow a single subscription and watch where it goes. Take one monthly subscription. Picture it as a stack of coins on the counter. The toll booth version says Spotify keeps the stack and hands a little back to the artists. The reality is almost the reverse. The large majority of that stack, commonly cited at roughly 70%, leaves immediately. It goes to the owners of the music, the labels, and the publishers. So Spotify isn't collecting a toll. It's a pass-through. The cash arrives from you, and most of it is already promised to someone else before Spotify can touch it. What's left has to cover everything. The engineering, the marketing, the data centers streaming to 500 million people. And you can see the result in the margins. The slice Spotify keeps, after paying for the music, has sat only in roughly the quarter to 30% band. For a software-feeling business everyone uses, that is shockingly thin. A real toll collector keeps most of the toll. Spotify keeps a sliver, which raises the obvious question. That 70% doesn't vanish, it goes to someone. So who is on the other end? And why can't Spotify simply pay them less? The answer is the heart of the whole thing, and it's about ownership. Spotify does not own the music. It licenses it, and the catalog listeners actually want is controlled, to a remarkable degree, by a small number of major record labels. 3 of them sit at the center of the industry. Between them, they control an enormous share of the songs you'd search for. Now think about what that means. Imagine Spotify tried to play hardball and pay the labels less. The labels could pull their catalog, and a music app without the major labels isn't a cheaper music app. It's an empty box. No Beatles, no Taylor Swift, no Drake. The songs your subscribers opened the app to hear would simply be gone. So Spotify can't walk away from the table. It has to carry that catalog. And the moment one side of a negotiation cannot walk away, that side has already lost. Spotify rents the one thing it cannot operate without. From suppliers, it cannot replace. That's why the 70% is so hard to move. It isn't a number Spotify picked. It's set by the people who own what Spotify is selling. This isn't bad luck or bad deal-making, it's structural. And once you see the structure, you understand why Spotify is the exact mirror image of real pricing power. This is the turn, and it's worth slowing down for. Think about the companies that truly have pricing power, the ones we usually study on this channel. A payment network like Visa sits at a choke point and takes a small cut of an enormous flow. The merchants can't route around it. Adobe owns the file formats an entire profession is trained on, so it can charge a subscription forever. A ratings firm like Moody's sits at a gate the borrowing world has to pass through. In every case, the company holds the choke point. It holds it against its own customers. Now look at Spotify. There is a choke point in music. It's the catalog. But Spotify doesn't hold it. The labels do. And they hold it against Spotify. That is the inversion in one sentence. The usual moat is a choke point a company points at the people who pay it. Spotify's is pointed back at Spotify. Same structure, aimed the opposite way. And this is why none of it gets fixed with better negotiation or a clever app feature. Pricing power lives wherever the scarce, unsubstitutable thing lives. In music, that's the catalog. Spotify owns the distribution, the app, the recommendations, the convenience. But it doesn't own the scarce thing. So the ceiling on what Spotify can keep isn't a temporary problem. It's the architecture of the entire industry, which sounds like a trap. And mostly, it is. But not completely. Because Spotify knows all of this, and it's been quietly building the one lever it can pull. So what do you do when you can't win on the main board? You change the board. Spotify can't manufacture pricing power in music because it doesn't own the music, so it's trying to build power off to the side, in places where it can actually own what's being sold. The clearest example is everything that isn't songs. Podcasts, audiobooks. Spotify has pushed hard into spoken word audio, and the logic is precise. When Spotify owns a podcast or an audiobook, there's no major label in the middle taking 70%. The economics flip. Now Spotify is keeping the toll, not passing it through. Then there's bundling and the algorithm. Spotify increasingly sells audiobooks and music together, so the value of the subscription rises without the music bill rising with it. And underneath it all sits the discovery engine, the system that decides what 500 million people hear next. Influence over attention is itself a kind of power, even when you don't own the songs. None of this rewrites the music economics. The catalog still belongs to the labels. But every one of these moves is the same move. It's Spotify trying to manufacture the pricing power that music structurally denies it. And a company this big, having to build its leverage sideways, tells you something. It tells you where pricing power actually comes from. So, let's answer the question we opened with. When you pay for Spotify, who actually gets rich? Mostly, not Spotify. And the reason is the real lesson here. Pricing power doesn't belong to whoever has the most users, or the most famous name, or the most traffic, or the slickest app. It belongs to whoever owns the scarce, unsubstitutable thing that everyone else needs. In music, that scarce thing is the catalog. The labels own it. Spotify owns the pipes that carry it. And owning the pipes is not the same as owning the water. That's why Spotify is such a useful company to study. Most of our episodes show you a moat from the inside. This one shows you the shape of a moat by its absence. A company standing exactly where the moat should be, finding the power held against it instead. The negative space tells you as much as the moat ever could. So the next time a company looks powerful, simply because everyone uses it, ask the harder question. Not how many customers it has, but what it actually owns. Spotify is the proof that distribution, scale, and a household name are not the same as pricing power. The toll booth can be busy every hour of every day and still not own the road. Spotify takes a cut of music, but music takes a much bigger cut of Spotify. And that gap between how powerful it looks and how powerful it is the whole lesson. Pricing power was never about who stands in the middle. It's about who owns the thing nobody can do without.